What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben and welcome back to another episode here on Military Mondays for our J2M3. Today we're going to go ahead and push forward here and try to get most of the cockpit finished up, everything closed up in the fuselage and then attached to the wings. So let's take a look at what we have so far. Last time we went ahead and overcoated all the internal parts with a nice coat of Mitsubishi interior green. I went ahead and used the Gunzi line of paint, and that was really nice to spray. It looks great. I like how it's turned out so far. I also took the liberty of adding in some scratch built details, adding in some wiring, and just making some seatbelts and trying to kind of spice up the cockpit just a little bit. We can go ahead and move on today with some weathering. So first thing we have to do is go ahead and apply all of the decals that are going to be here on the cockpit. So the instrument panel, any gauges, anything like that. We're going to go ahead and get that all wrapped up now. Going to be using some microsol, microset, the decal itself, and then we're going to overcoat everything and make sure we can go ahead and weather it down using some panel line accents, some colored pencils, whatever we can do, and then of course overcoat everything with a flat coat. So let's go ahead and kick into this time lapse and see what we can do. Moving right along, everybody, as we can see that we have a finished cockpit, and I think it looks pretty decent. With the scratch built details, the extra wiring, the seat belts, everything I added in here. Wasn't a lot of material, but it's just enough to add a little bit more interest, and I think the weathering turned out okay. Went ahead and used a flat coat on that to kind of tone everything down. We've got our instrument panel attached on there. We've got the decal applied onto the front of that instrument panel, and I think it looks okay. It's not perfect, but I think it's going to pass for what we're doing. So let's go ahead and move on and get the fuselage all glued together. Now to go ahead and get this fuselage all nicely buttoned up, we're going to be using some Tamiya extra thin cement. Now this stuff is awesome. It's pretty much my go-to cement for most things. There are others out there on the market that I'm sure work just as well, but for some reason I just lean more towards Tamiya. So yeah, not too bad. Everything lined up well. The panel lines look beautiful. They all match from left to right side, so we are good with that. Now let's go ahead and turn our attention to the rear decking right behind the pilot. Now from my understanding, this should actually be the area that houses the radio. And even though the radio here in the Hasagawa kit isn't the most detailed, I'm going to use it and we're going to do a little bit of scratch building with it. Add a couple of cables coming out of the back of the radio, and apparently they looped around the right side and came around the front and then down through that top plate in somewhere inside. So we're going to go ahead and replicate that as best as we can. So I'm going to go ahead and start off here by drilling a very small hole here on the right side of that rear decking. I'm just going to make a little bit of an impression with my pin vise. We're going to drill that out. We're going to lace up some wires around there and make it look a little bit more interesting. And well, we'll see how it goes. We also have the wings to take care of, the rear tail section, as well as the cowling and all that great stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into our second time lapse and get this thing a little bit closer to being finished. All right, everybody, we are back. And as you can see, we have our cockpit installed. We have our fuselage installed with the wings. All the wings are on there. I'm doing a little bit of dry brushing with some Tamiya buff, just lightly over some of the raised areas and over the wiring. I used 0.3mm solder and I painted them actually a flat black color. And then when I dry brush over the top of this, it kind of mutes them down a little bit, gives them a little bit of a faded look. We're also going to have to go ahead and do a little bit of touch-up seams here and there, but for the most part, all the fit has been really, really stellar. I mean, it's a Hasagawa kit, so that's to be expected. Now there is one extra piece here on the very front of the cockpit that kind of extends onto the cowling, and that actually holds the armor-plated glass that sits right in front of the pilot. Speaking of armored glass, we are given one very clear part for armored glass, and we're going to go ahead and mask it off, and it looks like the trim around the glass would actually be that interior Mitsubishi cockpit green. So I'm going to go ahead and mask off the clear part, and then we're going to airbrush over the top of that with just a real quick couple of coats of our interior green. That should go ahead and bring it down to the same color as the rest of the cockpit, and I think once I install that, it should balance out nicely. We're going to use a toothpick, some Tamiya tape, we're going to burnish down the edges, and then using a very sharp X-Acto knife, we're just going to slice off and cut out the opening in the center, and I think we'll be good. So while that part is drying off camera, let's go ahead and install the very front of the windscreen and cowling area. It drops right into place, everything lines up, and a little bit of Tamiya extra thin. It's not going to go anywhere. And this is pretty much the extent of the cockpit. After this, we do have to go ahead and figure out what to do with the canopy. That's going to be important, but other than that, the cockpit is more or less finished. And here we are, everybody. This is our jack as it stands right now. The J2M3 is looking pretty awesome. We've got our seat installed. We've got our cockpit all weathered down. We've got our seat belts in place. We have our radio equipment installed, as well as a couple of extra wires here and there. Did a little bit of scratch building on that rear decking, not a whole lot, but just a little bit to add in a bit of extra detail. I also went ahead and did some work on the wheelbase. My references showed a couple of holes that were drilled into the bottom of it, so I've done that, and I've also put in some long 0.3mm wires to run right in front of the openings there in the sides of the wheelbase. I think that really helps. It adds a little bit of character. They're not really going to be seen all that much, but just in case you kind of look in there, there'll be something there for you to look at. Just a real quick close-up here, you can see that I took a lot of time trying to get those seatbelts to look a little bit better and a bit more in scale. I didn't really capture it as closely as I would like. I think they're still a little bit too big. I did add in that wiring as well as a little bit of artistic license for the different dials and gauges because, well, who knows what color they really were. That looks decent. Also on the bottom of the aircraft, I've got our 2 holes per each wheel bay, as you can see right there and right there. Those look okay. And I've also gone ahead and added in some wires. You can see them kind of shimmering right there in the light. That's on the front and the back of those wheel bay cutouts. Now again, I'm just going off some references that I found, and it does show some wiring up inside the wheel wells. So I thought I would go ahead and just throw a couple in there. And if you see them, you see them. If you don't, well, at least I know they're there. So overall, this is really coming along beautifully. This is such a great kit, guys. But we're going to go ahead and call it quits for today, guys. The J2M3 is looking awesome. And next time we'll come back and we'll start going ahead and taking care of some of the seams. Not that there's a lot of them, but we do need to go over a couple of the panel lines to make sure that we have everything nicely smoothed out. Maybe add a little bit of putty on the wing root area, though it actually is pretty stellar. In terms of overall parts, we've got the very top of the cowling we need to go ahead and do. And then of course, the canopy as well. So until our next episode, thank you so much for watching. You know the drill. Go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool. And we'll see you back here on episode number 4 for the J2M3 Raiden by Hasagawa. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.